It is one of Earth's final frontiers, a place untouched, unyielding, and utterly indifferent to human life. A continent of silence and storms, where the cold itself feels alive. Antarctica. This frozen land seems like the end of the world, a vast white wilderness at the bottom of the globe, unreachable and uninhabited. Yet beneath its ice and along its desolate shores, the past whispers. And in the 1980s, that whisper became a revelation. The discovery of human remains in a place no human was supposed to be. The find challenged history, baffled scientists, and left us with haunting questions. Who was she? This lone woman buried beneath Antarctic sand and snow. How did she come to rest in a land no one was known to have reached? And could this discovery mean that someone, perhaps long before explorers ever arrived, had already set foot on the last untouched continent? This is the story of the Antarctic woman, the oldest human remains ever found on the frozen continent, and the mystery that still defies explanation. For millions of years, Antarctica has stood apart from the rest of the world. Once, it was part of a great supercontinent called Gondwana, connected to Africa, South America, and Australia. During the age of the dinosaurs, it was green and teeming with life, covered in forests, rivers, and marshes, warmed by a milder climate. Fossils of ancient amphibians, ferns, and even marsupial relatives tell us it was once a thriving ecosystem. But over tens of millions of years, the continent drifted south, away from the warmth of the equator. Ocean currents shifted, and an icy barrier formed, the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. This powerful flow of cold water isolated Antarctica completely, sealing it in an eternal deep freeze. By the time human civilization began to rise, when the pyramids stood tall in Egypt and empires flourished in China, Antarctica was already locked in ice, uninhabitable and unreachable. Its temperatures plunged to extremes no other continent endures. In the interior, it can reach minus 60 degrees Celsius, minus 76 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to freeze steel. No permanent human population ever took root here. Only the most resilient of seals, penguins, and microorganisms could endure. To the ancient world, Antarctica existed only as an idea, a blank space at the bottom of the maps. Long before it was discovered, people imagined it. For centuries, scholars and sailors believed there must be a vast southern continent to balance the lands of the north. Philosophers like Aristotle speculated about its existence, and by the time of the Roman Empire, maps often showed it as a vast, imagined landmass encircling the South Pole. The first confirmed sighting came only in 1820, when Russian explorer Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen and his crew aboard the Vostok and Mirny caught a glimpse of a massive ice shelf rising from the sea. Within a few years, American and British expeditions followed, charting its forbidding coastline. The age of Antarctic exploration had begun. That's why what happened in the 1980s shook the scientific community, because what was found there should have been impossible. On January 7, 1985, Chilean marine biologist Daniel Torres Navarro was conducting a routine field survey along a remote Antarctic shore, Yamana Beach, near Cape Shirreff on Livingston Island. The beach, located on the Antarctic Peninsula, is one of the rare spots where rock and sand are exposed in summer, free from the thick mantle of snow. Torres was collecting marine debris when something caught his eye, a curved, pale object emerging from the damp sand. Upon closer examination, Torres realized he was looking at part of a human skull, specifically the parieto-occipital section, the upper rear of the cranium. It was greenish from algae exposure, but surprisingly well preserved. Over time, more fragments surfaced, including the upper jaw with intact teeth. The central incisors were missing, but the bone structure was unmistakably human. This wasn't a relic of any recent expedition. It was something far older. When researchers dated the remains, they found something astonishing. The skull belonged to someone who had died between 1819 and 1825, years before Antarctica's official discovery. How could a person have been here before the first recorded explorers? Further examination revealed more details. The skull was from a young woman, likely in her 20s. Her cranial features and teeth suggested she was of South American origin, possibly Chilean, and described as mestizo, meaning of mixed indigenous and European ancestry. In later years, another femur, a human thigh bone, was found nearby, and a second, almost identical one was discovered during a later survey in 1993.
Their size and morphology matched the first discovery, suggesting they belonged to the same individual. Still, no one could say who she was, or how she had come to rest on a beach thousands of kilometers from any human settlement. Torres carefully preserved the skull and transferred it to the Instituto Antartico Chileno for further study. Despite the importance of the discovery, the remains were not widely publicized. Environmental protocols under the Antarctic Treaty strictly limited the movement, photography, and study of human remains to preserve both dignity and scientific integrity. In 1987, the University of Chile launched a follow-up excavation. Researchers dug a 3-by-3-meter trench in the area surrounding the original discovery site. They carefully sifted the soil, searching for artifacts or further bones that might explain the find. But the Antarctic environment is merciless. Ice, salt water, and wind can scatter or bury evidence beyond reach. Not a single new fragment was recovered. For a time, it seemed the mystery would remain frozen in place. Later studies hoped to analyze the woman's DNA, to confirm her ancestry and determine if the femurs and skull belonged to the same person. But the challenges were immense. Saltwater immersion destroys DNA over time, and coastal erosion had likely exposed the bones to countless freeze-thaw cycles. Despite modern advances in genetic sequencing, no DNA analysis has ever been successfully published. Whether the remains were too degraded or research simply halted, we may never know. So how could human remains from the early 19th century have ended up on Antarctica's shores? Torres Navarro himself proposed one of the most plausible explanations. The woman may have been part of a sealing expedition. In the early 1800s, as European demand for seal fur and oil soared, ships from Britain, the United States, and South America began venturing into the icy southern waters. Many of these voyages were poorly recorded, and some may have reached as far as the Antarctic Peninsula years before the first official discovery. Could the woman have been aboard one of these ships? Perhaps as a worker, a stowaway, or even a companion to a crewman? It's possible she died at sea, and her body was buried overboard, later drifting ashore. Ocean currents around the Antarctic Peninsula could easily carry debris, or bodies, from South America to these icy beaches. Another theory suggests she might have been indigenous, perhaps Yagan or Mapuche, accompanying sealers or explorers from the southern tip of Chile or Tierra del Fuego. Indigenous people from this region were known for their extraordinary adaptation to cold marine environments, traveling long distances in small canoes. If true, her presence on Antarctica would represent one of the earliest examples of human exploration of the southernmost reaches of the planet. A quiet, forgotten voyage that left behind no flag, no records, only bones and mystery. The idea of a lone woman resting beneath the Antarctic wind is haunting. Her story, though silent, forces us to confront how much of history remains unwritten. While explorers like Bellingshausen, Bransfield, and Palmer earned the fame of discovering Antarctica, the remains on Yamana Beach hint that human presence might have preceded them. Did forgotten sealers from Chile or Argentina touch its shores first? Could unrecorded expeditions from South America, or even earlier civilizations, have reached this frozen frontier centuries ago? There's no evidence yet to prove such theories, but discoveries like this remind us that history is often shaped as much by what's missing as by what's found. Today, Antarctica remains one of the least explored places on Earth. Beneath its ice lies an archive of ancient climates, buried meteorites, and possibly the frozen remains of civilizations that once walked the Earth long before us. As the planet warms, glaciers are retreating, exposing rock and soil unseen for millennia. Scientists believe that as this process continues, new discoveries, fossils, microbial life, even more human artifacts could emerge from the thawing permafrost. Perhaps more remains will surface. Perhaps her story will finally be told. Until then, the woman of Yamana Beach remains one of Antarctica's most haunting mysteries. A single human presence on a land once thought forever untouched. When we look at Antarctica today, we see a landscape of extremes, of cold, silence, and dazzling beauty. But beneath that ice lies evidence of how deeply connected our world truly is. From the forests that once covered the continent to the human skull found upon its shore, Antarctica reminds us that no place on Earth is truly beyond the reach of time, tide, or life itself.